Hello. Thanks for coming. I definitely don't have as cool of stuff to say as some of the people here, so hopefully this will be fun. My name is Patrick. I spend a lot of time in consumer internet companies on the business side, building a lot of the core businesses. The main company I stayed at for the longest was Robinhood, and I spent a lot of time there building a bunch of the parts of the business, including crypto, also a lot of the operations, and international. When I started doing international, one of the early things we did was partner with Baidu in China. It was a very short partnership. The government was not very happy about that partnership because of capital controls, but it helped me learn a lot about sort of the Chinese technology ecosystem. And I've been pretty interested ever since. My partner Chris and I now invest in Chinese founders that build for global in consumer internet and hardware. And two of the companies that we work very closely with and are investors in are Plod, which is an AI voice recorder, and Manus, which is a general agent. We talked to a lot of founders, so I thought I'd just sort of maybe give some observations about the last few months. I think there's been in the last 4 or 5 months, so many changes in the way that people are talking about agents, the way people are talking about, basically models getting so powerful that they can really control your computer and do a lot more than just maybe be a chatbot or generate pictures or video like they did last year. And I want to talk about kind of what we've been seeing and maybe some just very high-level thoughts. So everyone feels I think everyone feels that the game is very different now, like the last few months. We're seeing just news of just companies just generating tons and tons of revenue very, very quickly and getting tons of adoption. Usually, when I would do investing in the past, to get to a $50 or $100 million ARR would take years and many pivots. And I think when founders see this, it's almost confusing because it's not really clear what you should be focused on or prioritizing to sort of get this very fast growth or even have a chance at it. We meet a lot of young founders and older founders, and I think they all have sort of the same questions. It doesn't really matter what kind of AI tools they're building. They could be building productivity tools. They could be building, creative tools, tools for corporate, tools for consumer. I think everyone kind of has the same question. And so we have some observations about what we've been seeing kind of in those teams and how those teams are operating and kind of what differentiates teams that are winning and losing maybe right now. Okay, I have a quick question. Who here has one paid AI subscription? Raise your hands. Okay, cool. Who always subscribe? Raise your hand if you always subscribe to the newest thing that comes out and not just stick with your existing subscription. Does that make sense? So okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I think what we find actually talking to founders and people on teams is that they find a model they like and they just keep using it. And these teams are typically building AI products. And I think this might be kind of obvious, but one of the observations that we've made is that if you use the newest model, you kind of have a view into the future. And if you don't use the newest model, you actually are not sure entirely what the capabilities of AI are and how it might affect your business. A lot of people, for example, will avoid using a newer model because it's more expensive or the tokens are, they get fewer tokens, but actually, even though it feels like, that is maybe a bad trade-off or just unnecessarily, an unnecessary way to spend money, I do think that what we observe is that the teams who are constantly integrating or engaging with the newest models have the best insights about what product can be built. And the people that don't are actually just clueless. Like we've met, for example, a number of teams that do video models, or maybe not video models, but are post-training a video model or doing a video model in a creator tool, and we'll ask a simple question like, when's the last time you benchmarked this thing you're working on? And a lot of times the answer is like not like 5 months ago, right? They're actually not taking it seriously, and they're not understanding how a model could actually disrupt their own business, or they might be making assumptions about models that are going to create risk to what they're doing. And it's kind of unnecessary if they just spent time spent the money. So I think one thing that we like to see from teams is that they're actually living on the frontier, and that people are constantly trying out the new models in their own workflows to get a better insight about what's possible. In our portfolio, Plod actually, which is an AI voice recorder, I think they're doing about $180 million in run rate. They grew very, very fast. Plod actually started as a digital voice recorder that was going to use like deep learning models or something for transcription. It wasn't even, GPT was not even on their radar. But what was really helpful for them is that they were paying attention to language models and transcription. The day that GPT came out, they realized that this was going to completely change their business, and they pivoted incredibly fast, and they leveraged their existing hardware advantage in Shenzhen, being able to like develop really powerful hardware, but they immediately integrated the sort of newer technology in the model. And it really, I think, gave them a huge advantage on the product quality and the product experience. Another example we have is Manus. Their original product was called Monica. And Monica, by default, was a model aggregator. So every time a new model would come out, they would immediately try to integrate it into the existing product. So they were forced to actually deal with the new models because that's exactly what they were selling to their customers. I think in both cases, the fact that they were they were very, very specific about like what they needed to be focused on and what they needed to be paying attention to really helped them position themselves for what was to come. The other thing we've been seeing is that like the thing that goes viral is being the first, which seems obvious, but actually I think actually the only way to do this is to be on the frontier and to take advantage of the fact that you will have an insight before other people if you use these models quickly and really engage with them deeply. And so the thing that we're seeing across like every product in AI is that customers are just willing to adopt and switch like very quickly. There's no lock-in right now. So I think one side of the equation is like, you know, how do you get your customers? And I think this is a really great way to position if you can be the first of X, or you can figure out, you know, what is something you can do that other people haven't done yet because you understand something better about a model than other people. And then the other question is, how do you then retain those users because they do switch if you fall behind. So I guess one thing we learned with Manus is that you have to be kind of ready to go if something happens. If you get any sort of traction, you have to have your team your team has to be very flexible. Like you have to be ready to get on airplanes, talk to customers, meet regulators, and you know, do whatever it takes to sort of maintain the advantage if you go viral. There's going to be a lot of copycats and fast followers to what you're doing. So you really need to make sure that you're not sitting in your office just like thinking about the technology. Once you launch, you need to start talking to your customers, and you need to kind of get out of the office and very, very quickly understand the impact of what you've built. I think it's actually not always obvious just looking at data, looking at dashboards. And you know, sometimes you know, people are pretty actually scared to talk to their customers even. They don't do proper customer research. They just kind of like read inbound emails or tweets and assume that that's kind of what the market is saying about their product or thinking about their product. And I think that's a pretty suboptimal way to take advantage of the thing that you just were able to create. So yeah, the thing that Chris and I spend a lot of our time doing is thinking about like what might happen, who to get in touch with overseas if your product is growing in other markets. It's probably worth noting too that Chris and I, when we started this sort of business of investing in founders in China who are building for global, we assumed that most of the market would be in the US. And it's probably our bias, but you know, historically, the US consumer is quite strong. The thing that we're realizing, looking at competitive products, our own products in our portfolio, is that actually revenue is incredibly diversified globally, and it's not just US concentrated. which I actually think is good news for Chinese companies in particular, because there's a trust building exercise that goes on in the US that is incredibly difficult. Whereas if you go to the Middle East, South America, parts of Europe, there's less requirement to do that. So one thing that I think is really interesting is you might have an assumption that because maybe your marketing materials are in English, maybe you only translated your app to a couple of languages, that you would see traction in like a very specific place. But we're seeing across the board through SEO data, like other things, that actually, for example, like Brazil is a really big market. And Brazilians are actually incredibly overrepresented relative to their GDP for like AI spend. So yeah, I have a short presentation. So this is the last slide. I think the thing that, you know, we try to think about, like, how do you productionize these insights? Like, what is the strategy? I think you want to, there's been many presentations this weekend about, you know, how do you find customer insights? How do you find things that are interesting opportunities? And then I think the thing you have to think about actually is find AI that's not quite good enough. Like, what's an AI thing that maybe might solve this problem soon, but is actually not good enough, and people actually actively complain that is not yet good enough? Because actually, that's probably the window where you want to be positioned. Because AI is getting good so fast that by the time you're like ready to go, it's going to be there and meet you there for the opportunity. I think the other thing is, if you're seeing, then these models get better, like, you should be really actively integrating them as quickly as possible to see how it affects kind of early usage. At Monica, I said before, like, they added a new model like sort of the next day as soon as it came out, and we were able to see kind of the lift in usage almost immediately when we did that. So this is not as exciting as the other presentations, but hopefully it was at least somewhat insightful. Yeah, thank you for your time.